Alright guys, what's up? I'm just going to show you guys how really just to sharpen these. There's two ways to do it, and one of them, so straight out of the, when you buy these straight out of the box, they have a like a 0 ground Scandi edge, right? So they're ground all the way to the edge as a Scandi grind with water cooling grinding, of course, so that it actually stays ultra sharp and ultra hard. The way that you're gonna sharpen these, there's two ways. One is you just rest the bevel flat, so you see there's the machine marks. You can see that will give you, that will help you guide you like where the metal is being removed. So when we go on these stones, you just rest it flat. Now when you're sharpening a Scandi grind, what you really need is actually like a coarse, very coarse stones. Something like this, where, listen to this. See? That's what you need to sharpen Scandi grinds, because you're removing very large amount of metal. And I suggest you do that first. So you grind away material, and you can see the grind lines from the stone against the grind lines that are from the machine, the out the box, so you can see where you're removing metal from quite clearly. And you can see here, for me, it's quite even. So I'll push a little bit more on the edge. And where the sharpness comes from, so it comes from the relationship between the actual cutting edge itself, where the first contact to the material is, and then the transition from that edge to the bevels. Okay, so what makes a knife sharp is not how sharp it is on the edge necessarily, as much as it is the difference between the edge itself and the thickness behind it. So for example, here, this is a chef's knife, and you can see it's got a edge here and it's got the bevels here. Now the sharpness isn't just from that edge itself, right? That sharpness comes from honing that whole flat side of the blade down, right? What you want to do is you want to bring, you see what I'm doing here? I'm bringing the thickness behind the edge as thin as I can, right? That's why I don't really make Damascus kitchen knives. You see? So by doing that, let's just set it on both sides. We're making the thickness behind that edge as thin as possible. Once we're done doing that, we raise it and we touch it up. All right? So by doing that, that's how you get the sort of sharpest and nicest cutting blades. So the idea with this is the same. You can stay with a full Scandi grind from 0, from the spine to the edge, and that's perfect for carving. That's very nice for pretty much everything. But the thing is, if you're out in the forest and you're out on a hike, and you're not the kind of person who brings these kind of sharpening stones with you, or you need to touch up the edge immediately, like on the field, the best thing to do now, I like to get these kind of 10,000 grit stones. I get these all sorts of different stones and I break them into a bunch of little chunks, right? For example, like this, right? So I like to break the sharpening stones into small chunks, and they make great little things. But once you've, so what you can do now, after you've sharpened those bevels and you've made it as thin as possible, right, at the edge, maybe even have a burr. You bring it over to a 10,000 grit, and now instead of resting the whole blade on the side, you raise it a little bit, and then you just go backwards and forwards. So very simple. You just do that, and what this will do is that it'll remove any burrs that you have formed there, but it'll also add a micro bevel, like the microscopiest of microscopic bevels, right against the edge at a 10,000 grit. So you get very, very, very smooth cutting, right? But it also dramatically increases your edge retention, because remember, what you're doing now is right at the contact edge itself. You're sort of increasing the angle itself, right? So by doing that, you substantially increase your edge retention, but you don't sacrifice any of the cutability of the Scandi grind, right? So again, keep it as low as you can without touching those main bevels. That's where the sharpness comes from. It's very steep, and voila. And so the nice thing with doing it this way, right, is you can barely see that there's a micro bevel there. It's basically impossible to see it, but you get that vicious, vicious, vicious bite. So there is a bit of a burr actually, and then you get your strop and do that. Sometimes what you need to do is on the tip, right, it helps to, you run the spine as well, like that. Just the tip, all right, just the tip. It's a pretty nice sharpening stone, isn't it? It's over 100 years old. I got it from, it's an old axe sharpening wheel, but I cut it up with the angle grinder and turned it into a full-time sharpening stone. And then that gives you a little bit of that point. So there's nothing much more to it than that. It's very simple. And you get very, very good performance like this. And you can make yourself one of these. This is another strop. It's leather here, wood here, and very, very coarse buffing compound. So I put black compound. And this I have around my neck, and I strop everything with it. So very simple. And you just get, hear that? That's sharp. So personally, this is the best option for the scalpels, is a mixture of a Scandi grind with an ultra micro high grit bevel. And this will give you sort of the best all-arounder type of edge that you could use for carving woods, carving barrel woods and stuff like that. So you can go full Scandi grind, of course, if that's your thing, or you can add a 10,000 grit micro bevel on the edge. Both work pretty much the exact same. I can't really sense the difference. I sense the Scandi grind is maybe a bit better if you do a lot more woodwork, but in terms of all-around use, I recommend the 10,000 grit, because that just brings the life back to the edge, and you got a surface that you can just quickly hone. Like if you feel like the blade is ever getting dull, you literally just run it a couple times on a stone that's 10,000 grit. And the nice thing with the 10,000 grit stone, of course, is that it doesn't remove that much metal, right? So just like this, very easy. Just a few times. You can do it for, 60 strokes or something, and that's it. That's really all there is to it. I like to carry one of these around. This is for fishing hooks. I keep a magnet in there to test metals at the scrap yard and stuff like that. And it's just a simple little Lansky fish hook sharpener. They're the best. You should always grind hardened steel wet. So again, you can quite easily do a little bit of bevel work on there. Not much, like it won't remove that much material, but the nice thing with these Lansky stones is that I feel like they're the perfect grit for this kind of knife. So I'll just wash it off like this, and then I raise it and just do a few passes like that. And again, I'm not applying that much pressure. It's better to go longer with no pressure, I feel like, than shorter with a lot of pressure, because again, you don't want to remove that much metal. This is a very small blade, and if you start applying too much pressure and you sharpen it too often and you over sharpen it, you're not going to have much metal left at the end of the day. So like that. So this Lansky stone sharpening, this stone from, you know, just your regular old fish hook sharpening stone, makes a huge difference. That magnet in there. I like to carry magnet around. It's a smart idea. I also carry like micro compasses and stuff. So there you have it. Not much more to it than that. Very simple. Now, I didn't need to sharpen this. I haven't had to. This is a very old model. You can see that it's Scalpel 1.0. They haven't changed all that much, but I really haven't ever needed to sharpen this more than once. And that was after I dropped it on something. So you won't really need to sharpen these that often. You shouldn't have to. And having a strop like this, right, that'll make the world of difference in keeping the blade sharp. And of course, you know, when you're cutting with it, you know, you don't want to cut, like if something is covered in dust and dirt and, you know, grit, you know, maybe avoid cutting into that. So like, you know, which knives you use to cut which things, you know, that makes a big difference too. Like, of course, you know, for example, with my Kisaki, the reason it stays sharp, even though, you know, I can still shave with it after chopping a few trees down with it, is because I'm not like doing anything unnecessary with it. I'm not cutting unnecessary things. I'm not playing around with it. I'm not, you know, I'm careful with the chopping blocks that I use, for example. I'm not just going to use a public chopping log at a random, you know, campsite in some protected, you know, forest place, you know, with, you know, like Noxio or something, you know, because those are filled with stones. Because the chopping blocks, they get rolled over, they get flipped over, and so both sides are filled with stones. And of course, you're not going to use your nice stuff to chop into that. I mean, so, you know, the damage on an edge of a knife, generally it comes from some bit of dirt that's harder than the steel, like some kind of piece of granite, some kind of dust like that, and that'll damage the edge. So there you have it. Hope you enjoyed the video.